I'm starting the recording. Wait, so you okay, Lisa, there? I mean, it's weird. It's hard to see you, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm a little far away, but I can change it if that's not good.
So welcome, Rebecca and Lisa. I want to, obviously I'll formally introduce Seffi when we really start, but I just want to introduce the two of you to Seffi, our colleague from Jerusalem, who is going to be our guest this morning. I'm sure, Lisa, you're probably familiar with the Machlochet Matters program from Pardes, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so Lisa, as you can see from her tag, is with the virtual high school.
Okay.
Also,
I think we met at Peach Conference.
yeah.
Not Peach, at a day school conference.
I would love to have been there. I think you may have met some of my colleagues from Pardes. I've never.
Okay, yeah, I was next to Ruben.
Okay, yes. This was back in the day when we could be next to somebody, I assume.
That's right.
So those times. Yeah. Rebecca, hi. It's nice to meet you as well.
Yes. And I don't know which Liat this is that's coming in. We'll find out in a minute. And for Lisa and Rebecca and Liat, I just put in the chat a link to today's PowerPoint. And as I said, when I put it in earlier, I know one of the groups that I facilitate asked that they get the PowerPoint in advance so that they can take notes while we're doing the session. So obviously I gave you view only permission, so you'll make a copy if you want to make your notes on it. Okay. And Liat, good morning. Which Liat is that? Is she with us? And I know there are a number of other people that told me they were coming, and it already is 10:03 though, so give it another minute at least.
While we're waiting, perhaps I can ask Rebecca about her Torah Play project at Temple Isaiah. Are you doing stuff online with them?
Good morning. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Yes, actually, I'm sitting in my home office and I am surrounded by Torah Play boxes. So, yes, I've gotten into the temple, gotten our Torah Play boxes, and yes, 4 of us actually are doing Torah Play stories online. So I set up a little studio here in my office, and I've been doing the Torah stories for 2nd grade. Michael's been doing them for 3rd grade. Rebecca Smerling's doing them for K and 1 on the holidays. Yeah, so some of us are doing them and recording them, and some of us are doing them live. I prefer to do them live and do the wondering.
Great. Are you using a different camera when you do the story, or how do you show the story?
I have a camera that's attached to my laptop, but I'm taking it off and I put it on a tripod right in front of the story, and then put my laptop next to me on the side so the microphone is there. And I found that to be the best in terms of the view for the kids. I also do it up on a table now so that the participants can see the story, but also see the storyteller. Some of us have tried it just looking right at the story, but I think that you miss a piece of that by not connecting with the storyteller as well. So Noah is next. And I have big plans for the summer we'll have to talk about.
Oh, great. Yeah, love to. Thank you.
That was beautiful to hear. I can just picture it all. It's amazing. All right, so good morning, everyone who just is joining us. Welcome to our first session of the spring semester. I see we have some new
Doesn't feel like spring.
It doesn't feel like spring, right? It certainly doesn't feel like spring here, but Tu B'Shvat is this week. It's the 12th of Shvat, so 3 more days. Let's see, I see some new people. Michelle, welcome. I'd love to welcome you.
Thank
Can
you.
say a minute of a sentence about where you're from and
Okay, so I'm in I live in Manchester, Connecticut, and this is my 5th year here. I work at a synagogue in West Hartford, Bethel Synagogue, and I direct their hour after school or Sunday program, which we don't call religious school, but it's a very experiential kind of a program. Of course, this year it's experiential and experimental because we're really doing a lot of things differently, but it's, you know, pretty successful. We have about 110 learners this year. And I don't know what else you need to know.
what's your connection to Hebrew College? How did you get to us?
I just have always been, you know, I don't really have a connection per se, other than educational programming that has come out of there. And anything that helps to increase my knowledge and my learning, and any way that I can improve my educational experiences, that's kind of how I came your way.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Really happy to have you. So
Thank you.
We are going to get started. So for Michelle, especially since my name isn't in the box today, I'm Marian Gribbetts, and I'm the Director of Educational Initiatives at Hebrew College. And we have the privilege of hosting and coordinating and facilitating these sessions. And as I started to say, this is our first session of the spring semester. Yes, it doesn't feel like spring here in New England today. I think the wind chill is like -1 or something this morning. But actually it wasn't too bad when I stepped outside. But good morning, everyone. So I want to just sort of give us a sort of a lay of the land. I did put in the chat the link to the PowerPoint if anyone wants to make a copy and take notes. Our topic this morning of navigating inner challenges and societal discord through Jewish texts and social emotional learning. And I'll add social, emotional, and spiritual learning, which we'll talk a little bit about as we get through the program this morning. Obviously, is a topic that has been very much on all of our minds for many years, and it's not going to go away. Obviously, even with, especially with a new administration in our government here in the United States, we still have to be cognizant of all the others out there whose voices we may not agree with and whose voices make it difficult for us to have civil discord, and how do we navigate those challenges. So I'm really pleased that our colleague Seffi Kraut from the Pardes Institute in Jerusalem, where we have a long-standing deep partnership and relationship, that Seffi's going to share with us some of the work that they've been doing in this arena. She currently is working with about 20 congregational schools, I believe, both here in North America, but also I think in Australia. Is that what you told me? Australia?
We've got a few schools in Australia as well, yes.
Yeah, so she is familiar with our setting, you know, the way we do our work. She certainly is familiar with the way we're all working this year. And that's just by way of introducing Seffi. And let me say just half a sentence about social, emotional, spiritual learning. That is a framework that we at Hebrew College have been focusing on for quite some time. And those of you that were privy to Rebecca reporting about the Torah Godly play that she's doing, that is one of our signature pieces that our guiding light, Rabbi Dr. Michael Shire, has brought to us at Hebrew College and to the community. And we try to situate all of our learning, both obviously in Jewish text and Jewish tradition, but also in the knowledge of the child, the student, whether it's a child or an adult, as a social, emotional, and spiritual being. And we think that the things that we're going to share today will tap into our development of those concepts and ideas. So with that said, everyone, I would love for everyone, since we're a small group today and it feels pretty calm, just a quick breath in and a quick breath out to sort of make yourself present for the session. And then I'm going to turn it over to Michael. So if everyone can join me with a And then and I hope that that brings us all together in our learning community this morning. And so, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, Marion. Thank you. Morning, everyone. Such enormous events have happened since last we were gathered on this place, and this is a new year, a new opportunity for a new dialogue, and looking forward to hearing Steffi speak about that in our tradition. I just thought I'd bring you a little nugget from the past, and in particular in thinking about the fact that this week is also International Holocaust Memorial Day, which is a very big thing in other parts of the world, not so big in America. It's the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and it's the 27th of January, which is tomorrow. And we use this day, particularly in the UK, to think about genocide and to think about the nature of how history has come together to make people more aware and conscious of their responsibility to others, and not just for the Jewish community, but for the nation as a whole. And every school in the UK tomorrow will be doing a program around this commemoration. You see here a picture of Rabbi Leo Beck. Rabbi Leo Beck, who's on the right of the picture, standing at the podium. Behind him is the chaplain of the House of Representatives. This is a picture from 1948, February 1948, when Rabbi Beck was invited to give the invocation to the US House of Representatives in Washington. Rabbi Beck was the pre-war leader of German Jewry. He took on the leadership of German Jewry from 1933 and tragically had to witness the destruction of 1,000 years of German Judaism. He himself made a pledge that he would not leave Germany until the last German Jew had left, and spent the 1930s organizing, particularly for children, to leave Germany. And my parents and then my grandparents were part of his work in getting people out of Germany and going to England. He stayed in Germany. He stayed after the outset of the war and was in Berlin until 1942, when the Nazis pretty much shut down the organized Jewish community, and he was sent to Theresienstadt concentration camp at the age of 70. But he survived, and despite everything that he had gone through, he emerged from the camps to become a leader of worldwide progressive Judaism. And he would travel the world advocating for humanism, for dialogue, for the importance of coming to know each other. He never went back to Germany on an official basis, but he was able to help with some of the work that was being done after the war to help particularly German Jewish refugees around the world. So we've heard how President Biden has spoke about history and hope rhyming. I spoke about that last time we were together. He spoke about that at the inauguration. We know that we're in amazing times that are changing radically. We know that this is a moment in history that we're all participating in, and we have a responsibility. And as educators, what could be more prominent for us than understanding how the past affects our work in the present? So I just want to share with you some of the words that Rabbi Beck gave that day, 1948, in the House of Representatives to the Congress. It was actually Lincoln's birthday, so you'll see how he starts. Our Father, our God, we pray unto thee on this day on which 69 years ago was born that man who came to be thy servant. And he's talking about Abraham Lincoln, obviously referring to the Gettysburg Address when he talks about 69 years, which I work out to be 139 years before 1948, which would be Abraham Lincoln's birth. 1806, I think. I want to go down to obviously you can see the kind of English that was used in those days, but let's go down to the 4 lines from the bottom. He says, "Thou makest history enter the world. Thy servant, Abraham Lincoln, in a message to Congress said, we cannot escape history. So help us, O God, that we may not evade history, but may we be granted history." So here is a man echoing the words of Abraham Lincoln, who seemed to understand the very power and nature of their own times, of the experiences they've been through, of the difficulties and the tribulations of their own peoples and of others who they have taken care of. And I think there's no greater message, particularly for a time when perhaps we're open to new dialogue, when the arguments between us, the machloket between us, can be, not every argument has to be a civil war, as President Biden said, where we can understand the differences between people and do so in a new way, in a manner that brings us together rather than breaks us apart. And so in many ways, we are right in this middle of being part of a history that looks back to where we have come from, but makes this present such a different place. And I hope that we can all understand the importance of the work that we do with families, with kids, with parents, with our fellow teachers, with our clergy. We have the responsibility to bring that understanding to everyone in our Jewish communities. So Kavanah for this morning, and I'm looking forward very much to the rest of our time together. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you, Michael. Really beautifully said. And I learned some new things about Leo Beck that I didn't know. So thank you very much for that. Really inspiring. Great. I am going to turn it over to Steffi. I see we're running a little bit late. And since we're such a small group, would people be willing to stay on for 10 minutes so I don't have to rush Steffi along? Because we have some really good material to share. Roberta, you okay with that?
Yeah, I think so. I do have an 11:15, so I may need to jump off.
Okay, so I'm just, instead of
I'm
like
gonna have to jump off
pushing
also.
to 11, I'm gonna at least sort of, maybe we'll get to, we'll be at 11:05, okay?
Okay. I
Great.
apologize that I'll leave early also.
Okay, thank
I
you.
would just want to say that, of course, there would be no offense taken if anybody needs to sign off, and of course, you should do what you need to do. And
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to not feel like I have to push Steffi. And of course, if you've already opened up the PowerPoint, you'll see we already had a section of the PowerPoint that says additional resources. So we already sort of teed ourselves up to know that we want you to go further than what we're able to do this morning. All right, so Steffi, I'm going to turn it over to you. You want me to share the slides?
the slides, yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Will do. Give me a sec. I just
Sure, of
Yeah,
course. Okay, so I'll just say it's a real pleasure to be here, and I really thank Marion for reaching out, and looking forward to having a chance to learn together, all of us. And I'd love to start out with a quick question, okay? Just by a show of hands, how many of us would agree with the statement that civil discourse has become less civil in the last 10 years? Look at that. Okay, we have unanimous agreement there. How countercultural of us, right? There is something that we can all agree on, and that trend that we are all noticing is a trend that Rabbi Dr. Daniel Roth, who was the founder and head of the Pardes Center for Jewish Conflict Resolution, noticed as well, already 4 or 5 years ago. And he wondered, what does Jewish tradition have to offer the world in terms of how it approaches debate and machloket? Might there be some wisdom in our own tradition that could help reverse the trend or give us new ways of thinking about civil discourse and really push us forward? And he created the Machloket Matters project at Pardes. Oh, thank you, Marianne. Now I see it's on the screen here. And we in the Pardes Center for Jewish Educators have adapted those materials that he created for adults and have tried to integrate social emotional learning, experiential learning, and create that Machloket Matters project in order to adapt it for schools. And it's really this mission of thinking about machloket and how to navigate challenges through our Jewish texts and what our texts have to offer that brings us to where we are today. And so that is something that I'm really excited to learn together with you. Oh, I see Roberta had a question in there. Is this for purchase or available for free? It is actually available for free this year for all day schools and congregational schools that are interested. It's free this year, and it's a pilot year in exchange. So it's free. All the materials are free in exchange for feedback. That's the way we're working it this year. But you can see my email address is there. I'm supremely happy to discuss it with anybody at any point in time. Please feel free to be in touch. But today, we really like to just think through together and learn through these ideas of machloket and what does our tradition have to offer. And on that note, if we were going to think about what Jewish tradition or Judaism has to say about machloket, about debate, a good place to start might be, what does God think about debate? How does God view machloket? And for that, Mary, if I could ask you for the next slide, we're going to begin with a text from Midrash Tehillim. Now, I'm going to ask, if it's possible, I'm going to ask one of you to read, and I think we'll stick with this style throughout. I may ask you to read. If you would prefer to not read, please just say pass, okay? And I'll ask someone else. But happens to be that that Beth, you are on my screen right now. Are you?
Okay.
How do you feel about reading?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you at certain points. Okay, Beth.
Okay,
Okay, if you could read the English, please.
sure. Thank you. Rabbi Yanai said the Torah was not given in a clear-cut manner. Rather, on every statement God said to Moses, God would say 49 reasons, panim, literature faces. The matter could be pure, and 49 reasons why the matter could be impure.
All right, thank you, Beth. I could stop you right there. So far, what do we have? We have Rabbi Yanai from the 3rd century claiming that for every statement that God gave to Moshe, God would say, for example, this pen is pure, and God would offer 49 reasons why this pen should be considered pure, and then God would offer 49 opposing reasons to suggest and to claim that this very same pen is not pure. Okay, that's what we've got so far. Beth, if you could read the next 2 lines, please.
Sure. He, referring to Moses, said to God, Master of the universe, when will we know the truth of the matter?
I love Beth's emphasis there, the truth of the matter. I'm going to ask you just to, in the chat right now, if I ask you for one adjective to describe Moshe's feelings, how was Moshe feeling when he poses that question? Please just write in the chat. What would describe Moshe's feelings when he asks that question of God? Okay. Roberta says unsure or yearning. Great. Any other suggestions as well? You can unmute yourself. We're a small group. You feel free. Needing guidance. Okay. Confusion. Excellent. Questioning. Great. I think all of this comes across, and I'm going to add one more feeling of frustration, perhaps. God, we can talk about this issue of pure and impure on these issues and debate it back and forth until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, I need a policy. I have to create policy for this people. What do you want us to do? Beth, if you could finish it up, please.
Sure. God said to him, go according to the majority. If the majority rules, it is impure. It is impure. If the majority rules, it is pure. It is pure.
Thank you so much, Beth. So ultimately, God says, you're right. You do need a policy. You do need a position. You do need to know how to proceed. And in order to figure out how to proceed, we'll turn to a democratic vote. And the majority is going to win, and you'll follow that policy. However, I think there is in this text a lot to say about how God views machloket. First of all, this text claims, or Rabbi Yanai claims, that God intentionally gave us a Torah that was not clear cut, right? And you could argue that perhaps God wanted human beings to be involved in the Torah, right? It shouldn't just be literally come from on high and be given down to us as a finished product, but there should be back and forth involved, and humans should be involved in the decision-making process. And perhaps that's why the Torah is given in a non-clear-cut manner. But why should we be debating with each other 49 reasons one way for this and 49 opposing reasons before making a decision, before deciding on a course of action? And for this, I want to draw our attention to Rabbi Yana's use of the number 49. It is not a coincidence, not a coincidence at all. Does anyone want to just show a hand here? Anyone have any idea of what, in rabbinic tradition, what is the significance of the number 49? Anyone have any thoughts about that? Michelle, go for it.
Well, the first thing that came into mind was the Akmalachot of Shabbat, but I don't know why this would be related to this. I had other thoughts about the concept of giving reasons for and against, but that's not your question.
Okay. You have me intrigued. I am intrigued to hear your other questions. I'm conscious of the time here, so but I want to hear it. So if you want to put the question in the chat, that would be your other ideas in the chat. That would be great. Or we can talk afterwards. You can email me all of that. I would love all of that. I think one hint here, and it's an important hint, is that 49 is significant in Jewish tradition, largely because it's the number before 50. What is significant about the number 50 in Jewish tradition? So 50, we may be familiar with the concept of Jubilee, right? The Jubilee year or the Yovel year, which is the 50th year. And in that 50th year, what happens? In the 50th year, all land reverts back to its original owner. It's kind of like a reset, okay? Within the agricultural system. And it has the Yovel year, the Jubilee year has other implications as well. And what we see in Jewish tradition and theology is that 50 comes to represent, in many ways, 50 represents a closing, right? A restart, a reset, okay? And so what happens with the number 49, why is 49 so significant? Because it's the number before 50. Let's step back a moment. Why is that significant? Well, if 50, what Rabbi Yanai seems to be saying here and what God seems to be modeling is that if 50 represents a closing, no human being ever has absolute knowledge. No human being ever holds all 50, right? No human being knows everything, no matter how much research or no matter how diligently they research. And so what Rabbi Yanai seems to be saying, right? That's a great question. We'll come right back to it. Thank you. What Rabbi Yanai seems to be saying here is as follows, or what God seems to be arguing for is as follows. We should do our research and we should have our convictions and we should have our opinions. And we should come to the table with those convictions, with those opinions, and with all of our research. But when we go into conversation with someone else, or before we make a decision about a particular course of action, we must first recognize two things. Number one, I do not have all 50, and therefore I have intellectual humility. That's an important thing, intellectual humility, to recognize that someone else holds knowledge or that I do not have, or a perspective that I do not have. And before I can determine a certain course of action, I need to pair that intellectual humility with intellectual curiosity. Can I genuinely walk into a conversation and think of it as a 49-49 conversation? Recognizing that I don't hold complete knowledge and that I genuinely want to hear what someone else has to say to genuinely understand where they are coming from. That seems to be a perspective that God is offering here, right? A view of machloket, intellectual humility and intellectual curiosity. I'm going to pause there for a moment just to take a look at these questions in the chat. That says,
can I just ask, I mean, I just want to try to apply that what you just said about 49 being right before 50 to the the 49 days of the Omer, which I could see applying that to Shavuot being 50, but there's so much about the 49 and about closing 7 weeks, and finishing that 49th day, that I think in that case, there is something about the 49 also, not just that it's right before 50, even though 50 is a huge addition in the way you just described to the 49.
I think it's a great point. 49 sort of represents the journey, right? And 50 is the culmination. And I think your application of it to the Omer is spot on, really spot on. I think it works it there as well, certainly. And Beth had this question: does God's explanation disregard those that aren't the majority? That is such an interesting question. I think really applying what do we do when we need a policy, right? This is the question of the day, right? Let's imagine for a moment that you had 75 million Americans who voted one way and 82 million Americans who voted another way. Let's just, really using our imaginations for a moment. What does that say when one side emerged victorious in the election and 75 million people, quote unquote, lost the election? Should we be ignoring what those 75 million people hold dear? Should we try to be interested to understand what it is that they hold dear? What matters to them, right? These are tough questions, really tough questions. I hope that you will not be disappointed when I say we're not going to resolve them today, at least not in the next 12 minutes. I hope that's okay. But yes, what a great question to ask. What a great question to ask. And this text, well, let's just give a plug for Jewish text for a moment, okay? This is, yes, exactly. There's some thumbs up. Marion's clapping. A plug for Jewish text to speak to our experiences in the modern times, most certainly.
Before you go on, I just want to pipe in something about the 49, just to sort of connect it to one of our other sessions. If those of you that were on when it was sigged, do you remember that's a 49-day moment also, that brings us to Kislev. So I just remember early on in my academic life learning about the anthropology of numbers in ancient societies. And, why do we have 12 tribes? Why do we have 10 for a minyan? Why do we have 7 days? All those numbers have meaning, and 49 is the 7 times 7, as we know. And it's like, that's when you get to a lot. 49 is like anthropologically a lot. So just to sort of bring that in as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's so terrific. And you will see rabbinic literature using this number 49 and relying on it a lot. Just one final example of it. There is a midrash that states that Bnei Israel the Israelites had descended to the 49th level of impurity in Egypt. And it was once they hit the 49th level of impurity that God says, that's it, it's time to take them out. Why is rabbinic literature using the number 49 there? Because what it's saying is that once you hit 50, you're beyond redemption. It's a closed circuit. 49 was as low as we can go before being a lost cause, before it was an ending in and of itself. So Michelle here wrote, this seems to say that we need to hear all sides before making any decision. And I think you're right, Michelle. I think that is what this text is getting at. At certain point, you're going to have to come up with policy, but says God, you should not make a decision at least until you speak to someone who disagrees with you, at least until you hear a different perspective. That is a necessary component or before moving into a decision. I think that's exactly spot on. I think exactly what this text is getting at. And so we've established that machloket is necessary in order to learn from other people's perspectives, in order to try to understand them better. It's not that we have to be convinced by them or persuaded by them in the conversation, not at all. Nor is it that we need in a genuine 49-49 conversation nor should we walk into that with the intent of persuading somebody else necessarily. But we want to try to understand each other, because I know my intellectual humility, I can't see it all. So I need to hear from somebody else. So we've established that debate or machloket is necessary, but what type of machloket should we be engaged in? And for this, we're going to hit our next text. Thank you, Marion. Okay, and Rebecca, you are on my screen as well now. How do you feel about reading?
Happy to read.
Thanks so much. Okay, again, I may stop you in the middle.
Any disagreement, machloklet, that is for the sake of heaven will continue to exist. Other translations is destined to, I'm sorry, there are a lot.
That's right, there are a lot of, I didn't even realize that. It's destined to endure. You're doing great. If we'll finish up the first paragraph. You're doing great.
Yeah. And one that is not for the sake of heaven will not continue to exist.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So far we've got a delineation in this Mishnah of two different types of debates. A debate that is for the sake of heaven, known as a machloket l'shem shamayim, and the second kind of debate, known as a debate not for the sake of heaven, lo l'shem shamayim. Okay, so the Mishnah has now giving us two different types or categories of debate. Okay, if you could keep going, Rebecca.
Which is a disagreement that is for the sake of heaven. This is a disagreement of Hillel and Shammai, and one that is not for the sake of heaven. This is the disagreement of Korah and his group.
Thanks so much. So now we've got a paradigm, right, of an example of one of each, right? That a machloket that is for the sake of heaven. I'm going to introduce modern language in modern conflict resolution language. A machloket for the sake of heaven, otherwise known as a constructive conflict. A constructive conflict. Okay, conflict that builds, conflict that has some sort of constructive aim or purpose, right? As opposed to destructive conflict. There is, right, and what Judaism are well, I think one of the main elements that's important to recognize what Judaism offers or Jewish tradition offers is this notion that there is such a thing as positive machloket, positive constructive debate. And in fact, we see that in our texts all the time. The Mishnah and the Talmud have multiple perspectives constantly and preserves the minority opinions. This was a question that was asked on the previous text, right? Preserves minority opinions because we can grow in our understanding of each other and in our understanding of the world from hearing from multiple perspectives. And if you're curious about what might make a constructive conflict, what might make, a debate constructive, there is in the additional resources a wonderful animated video that I've used with both children and adults that talks about 4 tips for constructive machloket, constructive debate based on Hillel and Shammai, and that might be a helpful piece. So, Marianne, I just want to check in with you on our time. Do I have one more minute, or should I switch into the next piece?
I think it'd be worthwhile to switch, because everyone sort of has this concept now of the 49-49.
Fantastic.
Right?
Okay, great. Okay, so I was just checking in on that because so then I just want to mention also in the slides you'll see some sources from social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, and there are some where he discusses why machloket is so difficult, and I'm happy to talk that through with anybody if they're interested. We at some point we can.
No, Sefi, so I want you to go on to the elephant.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah,
I apologize. I thought you wanted the next text. Okay.
No, I want you to go on to the next chunk.
Okay. My mistake. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, so let's talk about why this is so difficult. Right? We've talked about two different types of machloket, but the constructive conflict seems to show up far less frequently in the world than destructive conflict, right? We are far more familiar with conflict that harms than conflict from which we grow. And there is a social psychologist named Jonathan Haidt, H-I-D-T is his name. I see Rebecca nodding. Maybe some others are familiar with him as well, right? Who wrote a book in 2012 called Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's a bestseller. Haidt is all over the internet. You can find him everywhere. And one of the pieces that he points to is a distinction in the way, two different parts of the brain. He says that there's a part of the brain that is the elephant and the part of the brain that is the rider. The elephant represents your automatic emotional reaction, kind of your gut reaction. That's represented by the elephant. And the rider represents your slower, conscious reaction, okay, and your and thoughts. So, and each piece of the brain, okay, has a very specific and very important function. So, just I'm gonna add to something kind of you know, very wild and crazy here. I'm gonna ask us all to unmute ourselves, okay? You just. Okay, we're going nuts. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, we're unmuting ourselves. What is the elephant meant to do? How does the elephant function? So here we go. Roberta, can I ask you, please, what is your cell phone number?
781-626-0986.
Rabbi Shire, can I ask you, please, what is your address?
139 Richdale Road, Needham, Massachusetts.
Look at that, okay? Not even 1 second it took you, okay? That's your elephant at work, okay? You don't have to stop and think. You just know certain things and it responds. The elephant also has another important role, which is that it keeps us safe. So if I touch my hand to a hot pot, right? As soon as I feel the heat, I pull back. I don't stop to think, oh, how hot is that? Is that hot enough to burn me, right? No, I just pull back. So thank goodness for the elephant. The rider, on the other hand, would be in charge of, that's the part of our brain that would respond to a question like, what were the causes, the social, economic, and political causes of World War I? Okay, that even Rabbi Shire might need more than 1 second to answer that question, all right, or to think about it, okay? That's the rider. So we've got two parts of our brain. And to illustrate this, okay, I'm gonna ask Marion to go to the next slide. And I'm going to ask us, this is why we need to all be unmuted, okay? And if I'm going to ask you to please follow the instructions here as quickly as possible. Please read out loud the words below from left to right. And I'm going to time it, okay? On 1, 3, 2, 1.
Green,
red,
Pink, red, yellow, orange, green, purple, blue, tan, pink.
Purple, blue, tan, pink.
Pink.
Okay, thank you, everybody. The last voice I heard finished up at 7 seconds. Okay, that was the last voice I heard. Marion, if you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please. All right, the instructions here are slightly different, but the difference is important. This time, as quickly as possible, please say out loud the colors that you see. Do not say the word that is written. Instead, say the color that you see. From left to right, okay? On 1, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Red,
blue, green, yellow, purple, red,
brown,
red,
orange,
navy,
Yellow,
pink, green, black.
purple, blue,
and black.
Okay, everybody.
Wow.
On my watch, that was 14 seconds. The last voice I heard was 14 seconds, okay?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
7 seconds, actually twice as long in our little experiment here.
Wow.
What is this all about? So I want to give credit to Jonathan Haidt and his group. They have this wonderful website called the Open Mind, and if you're curious, I would check that out. And he runs this exercise there. And what does this show? What has happened? Why was it that the first time when you were asked to read the words, we were so much faster than the second time when we were asked to read the color? And he says this is an illustration of what happens when the elephant and the rider are either in sync or not in sync. The first time around, you were asked to read the word. Now, we are trained naturally, okay, immediately. Our gut reaction is when we see a word in the English language, we read it. We read the word. So our elephant was telling us to do what we normally do, our gut reaction. And our rider also wanted us to follow those instructions and read the words. Why was it so much more difficult the second time around? because our elephant wanted us to read the word. That's what we're automatically trained to do. But our rider, our slow conscious thought was saying, hang on, hang on, hang on, slow down. We're not supposed to read the word. We're supposed to articulate the color. And so we're at war. Our two parts of our brain are at cross purposes. Our elephant is pulling in one direction and our rider is trying to override our automatic impulse of the elephant and trying to get it to slow down. Now, here's really the upshot of all of this. When we are dealing with colors, okay, the stakes are not high. Okay, so we have a conflict between our elephant and our rider. Asma, right? Nothing bad is gonna happen here. Where it gets far, far more complicated is when our elephant and our rider are not in sync on are not in sync when we are discussing issues with people with whom we disagree. Because what happens when we are in a conversation with somebody over a topic that really matters a great deal to us? I'm going to throw out a lot of topics here. Okay, I'm just going to say a few. And when we hear these topics, sometimes our elephants immediately go on alert because these topics matter to us a great deal, because they seem personal, because they relate to our identity or our value system. So let's say, for example, the word immigration, the words gun control policy, the word abortion, right? I'm just, all of these hot topics that people tend to feel strongly about one way or the other, if I'm engaged in a conversation about this with someone who disagrees with my position, my elephant starts to react. The alarm bell goes off in my brain and starts to make me feel as though I'm in danger, even if I'm just in a conversation. But my elephant is stampeding, running away, right? And running away with my reactions, because we're all human beings and these conversations often trigger emotional reactions. And my rider is trying to get me to stay in the conversation and actually listen to what the other person is trying to say, to try to understand the other side. But it is virtually impossible to engage in a 49-49 conversation when my elephant is stampeding in the other direction. And that leaves us with the challenge. How can we talk with other people and be engaged in conversation with people with whom we disagree when our elephant is pulling us one way and our rider is doing something different? How can I find a way to stay to stay engaged in a real manner, a genuine manner, a 49-49 manner? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marian, who's got all the answers.
No, thank you so much, Sefi. A very rich presentation.
Thank you.
Obviously anchored in our Jewish text, anchored in our Jewish history, but bringing it right up front and center to our immediate challenges in the world today. So before I move, so we do have another text that could potentially be an answer, but I do want to open it up to the group, because I think every one of you is currently challenged, or, whether in our, all of us are challenged in our personal lives, whether if it's just how our elephant starts to stampede when we're flipping the channels on the news or scanning through our news feed, or obviously in our classrooms with our students. So I just wanted to open it up and just hear some examples from your classrooms, or of how potentially you navigate with the children and the families, that balance between the elephant and the rider. And just one last sort of framing, and then I will open it up to the group. Many of you know, we've been in partnership with the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and Roberta and Rebecca, both of their schools are involved deeply with the work that we're doing with the IJS. And one of the pieces that I think has been most powerful is to, sort of how to use sort of the introspective, calming, slowing down, meditation, conceptualization of different challenges that human beings have because of our social, emotional, and spiritual life, and how that the work that we do with IJS and that Roberta and Rebecca are doing in their classrooms, how that can help to sort of moderate the stampeding elephant and bring it more in balance with the rider. So I'm just going to open up. Would love to hear from everybody, some examples, some thinking about how do we currently, how you may be currently doing something in your community, or ideas about what might be useful, and questions to the group. So Beth, you're unmuted. Oh, Lisa, you want to go?
I thought, I do want to answer your question, but before that, just an application of the elephant rider, which is so clear to me and applies so much to our education. When I watch a Hebrew video, I like to keep the subtitles on Hebrew to keep my elephant and rider in the same place, because otherwise the English, seeing the English kind of triggers my brain to go into what's easier for me. The way if you see a number when you're reading a Hebrew text, you tend to say one and not echad or something like that. So I feel that that's very, very similar, keeping yourself kind of focused in a certain way. And I think we forget about that in our teaching sometimes when we are trying to teach Hebrew and show English. So that's just an aside that occurred to me as Stephanie was speaking. Relating to the question more about civil discourse, we have an interesting course that tries to use civil discourse as a way of navigating it. I think if I just tell you the title of the course, you'll understand why it's so necessary. It is not, we're not teaching any text on civil discourse. We're not studying discourse. The course, actually the name has been changed. It used to be called Preparing for Life on Campus, but we thought that name might be somewhat of an anachronistic. So it's now called Preparing for College Life, the Complexities of Jewish Identity in Israel. And civil discourse is a mainstay of the course. It underlies every single thing in the course. And that's another way of teaching about that, is having people function in that behavior. And just like what you were saying about the IJS, I think doing it is very much the way to teach civil discourse.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, and the whole issue of practice, you know, we call meditation is a practice, yoga is a practice, teaching is a practice. And I often like to think of it as it is about practicing. The same way that
learning is a practice. I think learning is a practice too.
Yeah, and like learning an instrument, we talk about practicing. So how important it is to just practice and also be gentle with ourselves that we're not perfect yet. And we may never be able to be perfect because of the way our brains are. There's other research, you know, all the research that Haidt did was about the amygdala and the automatic responses and all of that. Other observations. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. Go ahead, Beth.
So I think that the best way that I can refer to the elephant and the rider in my circumstances is that the parents are the elephant and the children are the riders. You know, where really the parents always have that gut reaction, you know, should I send my kid? Yep, I'm going to send him. Or no, I'm not going to send him, you know, to school. And so, you know, I'm struggling with some parents that want their kids to stay virtual and other parents that want their kids to be in person. And the kids are learning, but now they're, you know, they want to learn more, but we've shortened the class time. And so it's, you know, I think that that's where they're slower and they're slower in their reaction. The students are slower in their reactions, but they're thinking more about their reactions when the rabbi or their teachers or myself, when we're teaching them about certain things, they're slower to the reactions, and the parents are they're just, you know, they have those gut reactions like, okay, I'm sending you to school. Okay, I'm picking you up now. So that's how I can relate to it in my circumstances today.
Yeah, and Beth, I think that's a really interesting, I don't know if it's not even a metaphor, just a categorization of potentially thinking about, so how do you sort of address the elephant of the parents to sort of calm them down, you know, have them tap more into their rider.
Yeah.
because it's the same thing as sort of that spinning up of a discussion that starts going
Right.
nowhere. So
Right.
just something to think about. Michelle, go ahead.
I was going to say that I readily admit avoidance because, you know, here I have a school, it's online, that kids are ages kindergarten through 7th grade and a bunch of educators. And I often caution our educators not to cross lines that will cause conflict, because it's complicated to navigate this very difficult period, you know, so we avoid politics, etc., bring Jewish texts, and spend a lot of time really trying to establish relationships, deepen relationships, and build trust, so that once we deepen the relationships and build trust, it's easier to have those difficult conversations where people are on different sides of a position. So for me, I admit the safe way is to avoid conflict in our school setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Rebecca and Roberta, do you want to share a little bit about your IJS practice?
Go ahead, Roberta. You have a time constraint. I don't. Go ahead.
Yeah, the IJS practice it's really, really wonderful. So this year we're focused on Midot. I don't know the background that everyone has and what we're doing, but we're focused on Midot, and there's various modules, but one in particular that I wanted to share about is Chesed, and it's actually one of the first modules, and the IJS introduces it as loving connection. And it's interesting, like I often think about it as just love, but I've been pushed recently to think about it more about loving connection, like between individuals. I personally am really challenged by Chesed, particularly in like the last few weeks, the last few months, the last few years. Like it's really hard to understand the other side. And how could you possibly provide like loving connection to a side that you don't agree with? But I will say, like when teaching little kids about or trying to like come together for tefillah or like community time following the events, like the insurrection on the Capitol, just being, you know, kind of at a loss for words when third graders are writing in the chat, like, did you hear what happened in DC? You know, an 8-year-old. And so, you know, we had a great little lesson about loving connection. And what if, despite being personally challenged, like on an adult intellectual level, like I have no idea how to provide loving connection to the folks that mobbed the Capitol. But I think like when you're teaching little kids about it, to talk about loving connection and, you know, being more understanding of everyone, it's been really nice. Marion, I hope I don't think I brought in the elephant, but anyway.
No, but you did bring the SESL piece of it. The whole, I forgot what article I was recently reading. It was actually even over the weekend about how when we, again, it goes back to this practice, how when we sort of tap into generosity, which is the chesed, the loving connection in chesed, how that helps our brain sort of expand and the molecules sort of push out. Again, I don't remember who the article was by, but when I think about the chesed practice, about sort of pushing yourself down, pushing down the elephant and making space for loving connection, putting chesed out into the world, that again is one of these techniques of trying to get the two in balance. Because I agree with Roberta, there have been times during these past 4 years and certainly these past number of weeks, how do I show up as an educator, not wanting my head to explode, not having steam coming out of my ears? You know, how important it is also as us as educators to create that loving place for our students to feel safe and be able to make space for how to navigate the world. So thank you, Roberta. Rebecca, you want to share what you've been doing at Isaiah?
Sure. So I think one of the foundational pieces that we really focused on at Isaiah is giving our students and families some language, some new language. One is recognizing that we all have both personal challenges in our relationship, larger challenges, world challenges, And then from that point, really just becoming aware of them, for one. So we've talked about an awareness, being able to know that we have choices, our Bahira points, and make choices. And then being able to return to our intention of our awareness and teshuva. And this is language that we just haven't used within our program before. And so all of us as educators in our tefillah are using this as our kind of our program charter, and really empowering kids and families with that language. And then the second piece is that we're using mindfulness in our tefillah practice in our classroom as either bookends, starting our sessions, ending our sessions, using some mindfulness moments as transitions, and giving kids really concrete tools for whatever they want to call it, mindfulness, meditation, silent prayer, so that they have a choice about what they're calling it, but really using it as a grounding through breathing, through visualization, through wondering. And I think that it's really kind of changed our environment. We're on a good path. We're on a good path.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I'm given the time, and I'm glad I gave Sefi the time to teach the 2 full texts, because I think that was really valuable, and sort of framing the elephant in the rider for us, and letting us experience that. I love how this session has sort of come together. On the PowerPoint are other texts that you can explore, obviously yourselves. I would urge you to bring them to your staff and to your children as appropriate. And just the whole concept of today's session really was to sort of balance, how do we tap into the spiritual needs, the social emotional needs, in order to lower the temperature and create the environment where you don't have to avoid the conflict. And Michelle, I totally respect, and I'll tell you again, personally, as you forget about Trump, but think about, I'll share, as a Jewish community member, in my own shul, my own circle of friends, my feelings about Israel, where I stand on the politics of Israel, I avoid that sometimes, or I feel really shut down. And, that's sort of become very marginalized during these last number of years, and certainly during these last 10 months, where we don't have a kiddush table to sit around and talk. But to sort of keep in mind, anytime there's that sort of conflict moment, how do we sort of moderate ourselves? And again, the examples from both Sefi's The Machloket Matters curriculum, and as she said, it's available for free, and the materials that we're using at IJS. And everyone should know that IJS has free daily meditation, like lunchtime meditations, and all their material, not all their material, many of their materials are available. And certainly there's no one else. I'm from Boston right now, so I hate to say it, but so for Beth and Michelle, our partnership with them is limited to the Boston schools. But for sure, talk to me if you want to connect about any of the information from there. Any last thoughts, comments before we say Lehitraot?
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Marianne.
So now we should keep the elephant in
very
the room.
We should keep the elephant in the room. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. All right, Darabah, have a good week,
Thank you.
Wait, one last thing. Just upcoming sessions. We have on deck David Breifman for a conversation about sort of the future of Jewish education. If you don't know who David Breifman is, Google him. Jonathan Krasner and Sarah Ben-Or, who wrote the book about Hebrew infusion in Jewish camping, and sort of the transition. How do we translate that for our settings? And then Miriam Heller-Stern on creativity. So the one thing I want to just say out loud is both Sarah and Miriam are in LA, so we may push our time to 11 on those mornings. Is that going to be a problem for anybody if we go to 11 so that they don't have to wake up at the crack of dawn? Is that a problem for you, Michelle?
No.
No problem. Okay, Rebecca, that would be okay. So obviously I'll let you guys know, and the whole group. So thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
And have a good week. Have a great week.
Thank
Pleasure to
you.
meet you.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.
Kol hakavod.
Marion, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I am sorry if I left you without enough time.